I have been married to my husband Dan for 4 years and we're like best friends. We've always gotten along with each other and rarely ever fought. We have 2 kids, one girl named Casey who's 14 and another girl named Tessie who's 10 years old. We've been in the same house for 3.5 years and never thought about moving. I got home from work one day with great news. I've had the same job for 10 years and had just gotten a promotion. My husband was still at work, so I waited for Casey and Tessie to come home from school so I could tell them about my promotion. I told Casey first because it would be easier for her to understand than Tessie. "That's great news, Mom." I know, it took them long enough to see my full potential. I laughed and walked into the kitchen to cook something nice for dinner until my last step almost went through the door. What the hell? The floorboard was breaking. "Casey, can you please come over here?" "Yeah, what's wrong?" "Can you get the hammer, please?" "Sure." Casey handed the hammer to me and watched me pry open the floorboard. It was opening up until the staff of terrible odor came up. It was so gross and Casey was coughing. "Mom, ew, what's this?" "I don't know, go get the flashlight. There are probably a couple of dead animals down here." I grabbed the flashlight from her and looked through a small hole in the floor. I couldn't see anything except bags. So I called an exterminator to come and check. Luckily for us, he came over right away. He opened the floor a lot more and I saw the most disturbing thing ever. Those bags were actually body bags. The exterminator was horrified, and that's when he asked what my husband's name was. "Are you serious? My husband is not capable of this." There was no way Dan had anything to do with this, but I told him his name anyway, and he called up the cops and gave them the information for me. The exterminator and I took out the bodies and hit the smell with a lot of room freshener. He asked me to stay normal and not to tell anything to my husband. Dan came home a few minutes after the exterminator left. The police contacted me 2 days later and told me that my husband was a serial killer back 4 years ago and is still occasionally doing so. They also said that they're coming over right now to arrest him. I thanked the police and hung up. Scared, I turned around to see my husband in the doorway, standing there, not saying a word. We stood there, staring at each other until he darted at me. I picked up the mini lamp on the desk, hit him, and ran to Casey and Tessie. I locked all of us into Casey's room away from Dan. We called the cops to see if they had left, then waited. "The police will be here in 2 minutes," I told the kids. With Tessie asking all these questions and Casey crying, I got even more scared and started to cry too. I heard a banging sound in the house and Tessie screamed. Then I heard the police sirens go out. My anxiety was kicking in and I started to get a panic attack. There were bangings on the door, with someone yelling, "It's okay, we got him." I slowly walked to the door and opened it. The policeman was breathing hard and had a scared expression on his face. "You didn't get him, did you?" "No, ma'am. I'm sorry he took off." We went to the police car to talk to some people so they could get a better understanding, and that's when he saw the chance and ran away. However,
It's late night. Not too late, but quite late to sleep. But I want to watch TV all night because I rarely get this chance to stay up all night. My parents were out and I was home alone. My mom and dad had left for some important function, and I was not invited. So they gave me a mobile phone and asked me to watch TV with a table full of my favorite snacks. You know, it's always an awesome feeling to be home alone when your parents are away. We can do what we want. We're free as a bird. No one can stop us from doing anything. It was around 10 p.m. I was watching a horror movie on TV named The Haunted House. I'd been waiting to watch this movie since a long time. That too at night, and this was the chance. So I was totally leaned to that movie. I didn't even notice I got a call from my mom. I realized it when I saw the phone during the break halfway through the movie. I called the mom and told her everything was okay. She said that they would take some time to get back home, as there were many influential people at the party which were of business-related interest to my dad. I said okay and hung up. I started chatting with my friends and told them about how interesting the movie was so far, and they should watch it too. Suddenly, I heard something fall in my kitchen. I turned behind and found nothing. I consoled myself saying it may be just a rat. I just gave a look at the window, that was to the side of the door to my left. To my horror, I saw a man holding a knife and staring at me with his red eyes. Chills ran down my spine, and I froze. I didn't look around and immediately hid under my sofa. I didn't know what to do. I peeped through the small hole of the sofa, and my blood froze as the man was still standing, this time with a creepy smile on his face. I hadn't seen such a smile ever. It was scarier than any horror movie. I gulped and looked at my phone that I was holding in my hand. I took a long breath and called the cops. The call kept ringing. I was praying to God that someone answers the call. My heart pumped 100 times faster as no one answered. I called again. Please, God, one call. I prayed for the millionth time. Hello? Somebody answered my call, and that is when I felt like I was reborn from the dead. Hello? They said again as I didn't give a quick reply. Hello? Hello? Please help me. I pleaded with them. What happened, sir? There's someone outside my door holding a knife in his hand. Please help me. Sir, give me a second. I'm tracking your location. Please be patient. I was waiting on the call, and I peeped the second time, and my heart came to a normal beat when I didn't see the man this time. Sir, the police are arriving in 10 minutes. Please be on the line with me until they arrive. The lady spoke, giving me some courage to breathe. I was breathing as hard as I could, and I shivered. Sir, are you okay? I can hear some heavy breathing. Yeah, I'm fine. I heard the police sirens, and there were knocks on my door with a lady's voice asking, "Anybody there?" Happy tears dwelled in my eyes, and I ran to the door and unlocked it. I immediately felt relieved seeing the policewoman who was in front of me. She consoled me by rubbing my back, saying, "That's okay, we're here. Nothing to worry, child." The cops came in and started to investigate in the house. The lady police officer was with me, while the other policemen were wandering around the house searching. After a few minutes, the police made me show them my house, and I was totally shocked at what I saw. I almost died of a heart attack. The house had muddy footprints starting from the storeroom, continuing to the kitchen, and ended just behind my sofa where I'd been sitting, watching TV. I couldn't understand anything. I hadn't observed the house after my parents had left, unless for watching TV, which was still switched on playing the movie. Then they made me sit, and the lady officer asked me, "Hi, I'm Karen. Can I get your name?" "I'm George." "So I'm going to interrogate you, and you need to answer me correctly." I nodded my head. "So how did you see the intruder and where?" "I was watching TV when suddenly I heard some noise in the kitchen, but when I turned behind I found nothing. After a few seconds, I gave a look at my nearest side window and was shocked to see a man outside the window, holding a knife in his hand. He was grinning at me, and that look on his face was scary." "Okay, so what you have said is exactly matching to our expectations. But there is a slight difference in your story that may shock you." "What? What difference?" "The man, or the intruder who you saw through the window, was not outside the window, but inside the window. In fact, inside the house." I was stunned. My eyes widened, and my heart almost skipped a beat. "What are you saying?" "Yes, George. Let me show you an example," she said as she called a police officer and made him stand on the last footprint that was behind the sofa. I was made to sit in the exact position that I was in while I was watching TV. I looked at the window and was terrified to see that his reflection was like he was outside the window, whereas actually he was inside. I turned towards Officer Karen. She smiled at me and asked, "Looking like he was outside." I nodded my head and asked, "I realized he was inside, behind me, but how did he break into the house?" "He broke your storeroom, which was really weak." But why didn't he hurt me? That is what we're thinking. But by God's grace, you're safe now. You were brave to call us at the right time. We will inform your parents about this. You can rest for some time. We'll be here until your parents arrive," she said as she was searching for something in her pocket. Maybe a phone to call my parents. I sat down on the sofa, blankly looking at the window, wondering why that intruder hadn't killed me. And why was he here? To rob the house? To kidnap me? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more videos. There was a small celebration we hosted for our friends and family. After all the guests at the party had left, I watched my little sister Anna as she opened her last birthday present.
Anna, who's it from? I don't know, there's no name card. It's just written to Anna in a dark red color.
Inside was the most beautiful porcelain doll I'd ever seen. Her perfect milky skin was as white as snow, and her rosy cheeks complemented her big blue eyes. Her hair was nice and pretty. Her clothes were woven from pure silk and shined.
She's beautiful.
It's a shame you don't know who gave it to you, I said, observing the name tag.
What will you name her?
Mom asked.
Josephine.
Josephine turned out to be Anna's favorite birthday present. It seemed that Anna never played with any of her other presents or toys. Sometimes it seemed like Anna was obsessed with the doll. Whenever it was dinner time, Anna never wanted to eat. She'd stay locked in her room with Josephine. Anna refused to go to Mass on Sundays. I found Anna's rosary and cross outside her door on a lampstand, and that scared me a lot. One morning, I woke up at 3 a.m. I was thirsty, so I crept to the kitchen to get some water. I passed Anna's room and I saw the light shining through under the door and the keyhole. I put my ear against her door and listened.
Josephine, your hair is so pretty.
I heard Anna say in a very high-pitched voice,
Mom says I should quit playing with you,
And Jim says you're
controlling me.
Anna sounded extremely sick and even slightly demonic. I peeked through the keyhole and almost had a heart attack. Staring back at me were Anna's blue eyes. But wait, Anna had brown eyes. I stumbled backwards and pushed against the wall violently.
Josephine, what are you looking at?
Anna said in a voice that sounded like a million spirits. Horrified, I ran to my room and locked the door. Over the next couple of days, Anna acted very strangely. She looked very pale and sick. Mom called in for a doctor. The doctor came over and checked Anna and asked us to get a few reports done for Anna. When the reports came, they turned out to be completely normal, and the doctor said she was fit and fine. But Anna's situation was deteriorating. She never made eye contact with anyone. All she did was stare at the wall. She never did anything else. It was so creepy. Josephine had disappeared. Mom and I couldn't find her anywhere. One day, a friend of Mom came to visit us. My mom told her about Anna's condition, and by the looks of all of it, she suggested my mom to show Anna to a priest. She could sense something evilly suspicious in Anna. A day or two later, a priest came over to deliver the demon from Anna. He laid a cross on her chest, and Anna immediately screamed out. Her scream was like a demonic screech, 1,000 nails against a chalkboard. She was sweating, and her straps looked like they were going to break. Only the whites of her eyes showed, and you could see the veins popping out of her forehead. The priest started saying multiple blessings. By the power of the Lord, I deliver this demon from this child. I gripped my mom for support. Anna screamed louder. All of a sudden, the lights began to flicker rapidly, and it seemed like dark shadows were bouncing against the walls. 1,000 voices started humming around in the room, and I swear I felt as if Josephine was sitting in the corner of the room, but when I looked, there was nothing. Suddenly, everything stopped. The electricity went out, and the voices stopped. Anna was breathing loudly, and the priest was saying a short prayer of thanks. Then he turned to us. "Let Anna rest for a couple of days. Then she'll be fine. Keep her in her room, but do not talk to her." Then the priest set a book of prayers at Anna's bedside. He smiled at me, as if asking me not to worry, and then left. Anna lay there with her eyes closed. Mom pulled me out of the room. That night, I crept to Anna's room. It was locked. A dim light shone from under the door. I crept closer. That's when I heard it. Chants upon chants were coming from her room. Anna sounded like an evil spirit wafting against walls. What was she chanting? It sounded like a different language. Oh no! Anna was chanting our family prayer backwards. Completely astounded, I looked through the keyhole and saw Anna dancing around candles and a burning fire in the center. She was burning the prayer book, which the priest had kept on her bedside. A twisted, wicked face shone upon my little sister. All along the walls were horrifying writings and symbols, such as 666, and it looked like they were all written in blood. In my own fear, I passed out. Mom woke me up around 7 in the morning and asked me worriedly,
Jim, what happened to you? Why are you lying outside Anna's room?
Flashes of all that had happened the previous night came flooding to my mind, and I stood there in front of Mom, speechless. Mom shook me hard and asked,
What's wrong?
I fumbled as I said, Anna. Mom rushed to Anna's room and opened the door. There was nobody inside. I told my mom all that I saw. She immediately called up the police, and they reached in a few minutes. The search was on. Mom also called the priest to come and check. The burning of the prayer book and the weird numbers written on the wall, but he couldn't figure out what had happened. After that night, Anna was never to be seen again. But somehow, I knew that Josephine had something to do with it. Years later, I had a family of my own. My daughter, Sydney, opened her last present on her 8th birthday. Who's it from, I asked.
Doesn't say.
Inside was the most beautiful porcelain doll I had once seen. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more videos. When I couldn't find Mrs. Smith in the queue of pensioners for the 3rd consecutive month, I sighed in disappointment. The youthful, 65-year-old brightened the somber atmosphere of the bank every time she entered. She spoke to everyone, including Dominic, the senior manager at the branch, asking us about our families, the traffic in the city, or the mundane weather in a manner that seldom lacked enthusiasm. But I was her favorite. She treated me like her son and frequently brought homemade food for me. Often she pulled up a chair beside me, sometimes discussing petty issues, or sometimes silently observing me work. For the last 3 months, her son Sam collected her pension. He brought the relevant documents with Mrs. Smith's thumbprints. Unlike his gregarious mother, Sam never spoke more than what was necessary. He responded in monosyllables. If a lengthier conversation became inevitable, he preferred telling Dominic. In fact, Dominic only conveyed that Mrs. Smith had fallen ill, and the doctor had advised her bed rest. I winced. She had finally succumbed to old age. One evening, while tallying the bank data, I found that a fixed deposit belonging to Mrs. Smith was to mature in a few days. I thought of calling her to remind her of it and to inquire about her health. After a few rings, Sam answered. "Good evening. Can I talk to Mrs. Smith?" I tried to sound as courteous as possible. "Who's this?" "This is Andrew. Andrew Dale from Bank of Chicago." "She's sleeping." And before I could say anything more, the line went dead. It was 6 in the evening. I imagined the once ebullient old lady now lying on the bed and suffering. I made a mental note to call her the next day. The next morning, when I woke up, it was past 9. I leaped out of bed. Even though it was a Sunday, we had plenty of household chores to attend. Dominic and I had to buy fresh vegetables and fish, as our refrigerator was filled with only stale leftovers. An ever-growing pile of laundry lay on the sofa. I went to check if he was up in his room, but he was still sleeping. Dominic and I had been roommates for quite some time now, and soon, because of our common interests and hobbies, we turned out to be pretty good friends. We had joined at the same position at the bank, until recently Dominic bagged a promotion. However, that didn't change anything between us. We were still great friends. I prepared our usual omelette and coffee for breakfast. Dominic loved coffee. Mrs. Smith had once gifted him a coffee mug. Mrs. Smith. I remembered I had to give her a call. She must be up by now. I took out my phone to call her. Nobody answered. Undeterred, I tried again. This time, Sam's voice came over. "Yes?" He sounded irritated. Hello, this is Andrew from Bank of Chicago. Mrs. Smith's term deposit is maturing and, let's discuss that in the branch, shall we?" He snapped. Sure. What? A lump formed in my throat. "Can I speak to her?" I still asked. Sam took a deep breath. "No, she's sleeping." He disconnected the call. I stared at the phone until the screen darkened. "Whom are you calling? Why do you look tense?" Dominic came out of his room. "Mrs. Smith." "Who's she?" "Ah, your favorite aunt. So what did she say?" "She's sleeping. At least that's what her son said." "I hope you didn't ask him to wake her," he said with a grin as he gulped down the cup of coffee that I had kept for him on the dining table. "Too much sugar, Andrew. Cut down on it." I ignored his jibe. "She wakes up early. You know her sleep schedules as well?" "Impressive. But she's ill now, so I should consider concentrating more on work and office," he said jokingly. I grimaced. I wasn't in any mood for silly arguments. My mind remained glued to Mrs. Smith. Was Sam deliberately avoiding me? But why? I paced around the house. I drank 3 cups of coffee. I switched on the television and changed the channels one after the other. At around 10, I called Mrs. Smith once more, having decided not to budge without speaking to her. But her phone was turned off. "Don't you think we should check on her?" I asked Dominic, his eyes focused on a set of files lying on the table in front of him. "Whom?" he asked without raising his head from his files. "Mrs. Smith." I made the exasperation evident in my voice. "What's wrong with you? Her son is there to look after her. Why are you so bothered?" I'd never seen Dominic so angry. My face reddened. I glared at him and marched out of the house. The meteorological department had predicted rains for the next few days. Nothing like cookies and tea on a rainy day. I remembered Mrs. Smith say as she handed me a stainless steel box full of fritters a few months back. "You'll fatten me up," I said as I greedily took a bite of the crispy fritters. "Huh? You are young. You should eat without worrying." I missed her. I still had the box, and 5 more of her boxes. I always forgot to return them. She never asked me to get them either. I had to pay a visit to Mrs. Smith. I had been to Mrs. Smith's house a year back for Christmas. The 5-story building had worsened in its condition ever since. I closed my umbrella and jumped over the accumulated water in front of the building entrance to enter the dimly lit lobby. A suffocating damp odor was omnipresent. I reached for Mrs. Smith's name on the wooden letterboxes attached on the left wall of the lobby. 201. I smiled and took an elevator to the second floor. A young woman in a white uniform answered the door. I assumed her to be Mrs. Smith's nurse. When I asked her about Mrs. Smith, after introducing myself, she asked me to wait in the living room. The living room was small. It had a cane sofa set and an old-fashioned television. A photograph of a young Mrs. Smith along with her husband and a child was hung on the wall. The house had 2 more rooms, kitchen and a bathroom. The rooms were shut. Mrs. Smith must be in one of these. I sat on the sofa and stared at the ceiling fan that continuously made a loud rattling sound as I waited for the nurse to return with Sam. The minutes passed. My stomach was rumbling with hunger. Dominic had planned to order pizzas for lunch. I messaged him, I shall be late. The sky had turned into a deep shade of gray. I didn't want to get stuck in the rains and the resulting traffic jam. Impatiently, I got up and knocked the door of one room. Mrs. Smith? No reply. I knocked again. Still, no reply. I slowly turned the doorknob. The door opened with a creaking sound that reverberated across the room. I tiptoed into the dark room. The curtains were drawn tightly. Someone was sleeping. It must be Mrs. Smith. I thought of leaving without disturbing her, but I was overpowered by the desire to talk to her once. I inched closer to the bed and called out her name. She didn't reply. I touched the blanket covering her. Each and every follicle of hair rose on my body. I pulled the blanket forcefully. The rain hammered against the window panes. A flash of lightning illuminated the room as I stared at the bed. There was no Mrs. Smith, only a line of pillows. I shuddered. It increasingly dawned upon me that something very wrong was happening in the house. Sam and the nurse had not yet returned. I moved towards the other room. As I walked closer to that room, I heard a persistent buzzing sound. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed open the door. To my amazement, 2 massive refrigerators stood next to each other. They continuously made the buzzing sound in the otherwise quiet house. I couldn't recall having seen those refrigerators earlier. Where was Mrs. Smith? And what are these fridges for? I went to the first fridge and held its large metal handle. I shivered at its icy cold touch. My heart thumped loudly. I checked behind me. Still nobody. I pulled the door open. I gasped. It was empty. I felt like a burglar, but I couldn't resist the urge to check the other fridge. Praying to God, I opened it. Cold air hit my face. A loud thunder covered my shriek as I fell back on the floor. The pale, yellow body of Mrs. Smith stared at me from inside the fridge. She looked grotesque. Someone seemed to have forced her body into the fridge, making it bend. Her eyes were wide open. My head was spinning. I covered my mouth to stop myself from vomiting. I somehow pulled myself and shut the fridge. I ran out through the door, but something stopped me. Something was weird about the body. Something different. I came back and opened the fridge again. I raised her lifeless and stiff arm. The thumb had a blue ink stain. I heard footsteps. Someone was coming up the stairs. I hurried for the door. The elevator was on the 4th floor. I banged my hands over the elevator button. 4. The steps became louder. 3. I saw the shadow of the person. 2. I dived into the elevator, quickly hit the button to shut the doors. I slouched on the floor. My shirt was soaked in sweat. It was raining heavily when I came out of the building. I frantically waved at taxis. After 10 minutes, I got one after agreeing to an exorbitantly high fare. As I got in, I thought I had to do something. Sam was trying to keep the pension money flowing in for himself even after his mother was dead. Wait, what if he had killed her for money? I had to figure this out. I must involve Dominic, I thought. I was groggy when I got out of the taxi and almost collapsed while ringing the doorbell. Dominic dragged me inside her house. Dominic, Mrs. Smith, she's dead. I went to her house and... Relax, he said, putting his arm on my shoulders. I sighed. I was relieved to be at home. Have some water, he said. He brought me a bottle of cold water from the refrigerator. I drank the water. I never realized I was so thirsty. Thanks, I said as I slumped over. He shrugged his shoulders. You would be afraid to open fridges now. He sat facing me. I stared at him through the glass bottle. You would be afraid to open fridges now? I never told him where I found Mrs. Smith's body. I hope you're feeling better, Dominic said. The bottle shook in my hand. He smiled. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more videos.